My name is Ann Marcelli, and I'm a graphic designer and illustrator at the K20 Center.
I'm Shogren, and I am the senior graphic designer and illustrator at the K20 Center. I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia. I majored in journalism and English, and then I also went back to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and majored in graphic design and art.
I attended the University of Oklahoma, and my degree is in journalism with an emphasis in public relations.
I first got interested into journalism and graphic design really from working on my high school yearbook staff, and then I just ended up really working with a whole bunch of different clubs in college and really working on the marketing communications aspects of those clubs. So this just kind of really fell into what I really wanted to do as far as being creative, having structure, and going from there.
Yeah, I really loved writing, and I wanted initially to be able to work where I could write all day, every day. And so my senior year of high school, I got an internship at my local newspaper. And because it was a small newspaper, I kind of got to do a little bit of everything. So I wrote, but I also got to take pictures and lay out pages, and that kind of gave way to really enjoying the creative part of journalism, laying out pages, taking photos and editing photos, and that just sort of snowballed into graphic design.
Well, for me, it took about 4 years to do both journalism and English degrees. And then it took me an additional year and a half of non-stop going to college again. So about 5.5 or so.
My undergrad took 4 years. I studied journalism, and I also had a minor in Spanish. And then I went back and I did a master's program in a different field, which took about a year and a half, but I've kind of been able to combine those two things here in my work at K20. On a daily basis, obviously use a lot of creative skills, but also organizational skills in planning projects that we're working on, but also taking pieces of information and deciding how we want to order them and give them hierarchy. Every day is a little bit different. It kind of depends on what lessons and different resources we're producing here at K20, but the bulk of my day is spent doing illustration work. I also help a lot with publications, but I think that Caitlin kind of takes the lead on those things.
For me, a lot of the projects that I end up getting tasked with is really delegation, and then also really structuring and laying out a lot of the information that I'm given. So that can be anything from a flyer to an infographic. A lot of the times it's just dividing kind of and conquering our workload between me and Anne.
A good layout is one that's really organized and sort of leads the reader through information. You never want someone's eye to be kind of moving all over the page. You want the reader to follow the information the way that they would read it.
You're wanting to make sure that you hit the top points of the layout at the top in the more left-hand corner versus all the way at the bottom in the right hand. And so you can really delve into that how you need to, whether you use a technique like the Z reading technique, or if you want to do a perfect golden ratio kind of layout. It really just depends on how you want to direct your audience.
I think as graphic designers, we take a lot of concepts from visual art, like sort of space and hierarchy, and we take those concepts that you might learn in an art class when you're learning how to draw and paint and bring those into a layout space.
Above the fold basically means that when you fold a newspaper, it's going to be on the top edge of the newspaper and going to be able to see for everyone whenever you pick up a newspaper, whenever if it's out at a newsstand or really even whenever you get it in the mail. Basically, the most important or most influential stories that someone would probably want to read in a newspaper.
I think from like a technical standpoint, when I started, I worked at a newspaper where we published an actual, like a physical newspaper twice a week. And then towards the end of my time there, we moved to just publishing once a week, but doing more stories online. So from a technical standpoint, the way that you lay things out for a digital publication as opposed to a printed publication is a little bit different, but also having the ability to work online and to have a digital platform just opens up a lot more possibilities. You can include more pictures or a gallery of photos and just sort of make an article that's maybe a little bit more dynamic. And I think that that's a really great way to kind of hook the reader and to just flesh out a story a little bit more.
I think with my experience, kind of like Anne, I ended up starting at a more print newspaper and magazine and having that like physical product in your hands. And so we could always reference things online, whether it be videos or infographics or just really more interactive elements. So we know that people were wanting to be engaged with the piece that we were doing rather than just reading things. So adding an interview with someone in the piece or adding a infographic that they can kind of pick and pull apart online, it's a little bit more of an engagement tactic for a lot of things. But you also just have room to do more online versus just in print. Prints wouldn't be solely based on, okay, we have the text and the copy and then photos, and you can relate the videos or anything online based, but you also have just more content that you can help engage the audience with. With my experience in the newsroom, a lot of the times editors would decide where everything would go. It would also depend on the designer to, again, kind of lead the audience through certain stories and events that might have been played out for the newspaper.
I think advertising is also a really big part of journalism. So, usually at a newspaper you have an ad desk and they're selling ads, and at the newspaper I worked at, they would get the pages first and then they would block out the space for whatever ads they had sold and then give the pages to the journalists to actually be able to work around the sort of areas that they had blocked out. So a lot of times we had to plan our stories around the amount of space we had that was not being taken up by ads. So it kind of made it a puzzle in a way because we already had something on the page that we had to work around. But by having those first, we were able to work around them and not have to cut things because ads got added later.
With high school, I basically went with yearbook. That's really kind of what got me into design. I also, within yearbook, I wasn't afraid to kind of cross sections. I was originally a writer, but I always was photographing things for different events that we would have at the school. And I would also be tinkering with design layouts. I went into an editor role for my junior and senior year. And so just being active and being kind of engaged with that really helped. And then just being kind of crossing those same workflows into other clubs also helped me a lot. Again, just taking pictures of being in band and being in National Honor Society and whatnot, and just kind of saying, okay, this is really what I'm passionate about, and this is how I can bleed those hobbies into really my future career.